On a quiet morning in a small town, a tired and hungry French bulldog wandered the streets with scraps of food clutched gently in his mouth. He wasn't looking for himself, he was searching for help. When he stopped in front of a grocery store and placed the leftovers on the doorstep as if making an offering, the shop owner grew curious. What he discovered next left the entire community speechless. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss inspiring stories like this one. The morning air was heavy with the scent of fresh bread and coffee drifting out of a small neighborhood grocery store. Mr. Thompson, a man in his early 60s with silver hair and a heart softened by years of serving his community, had just finished arranging fruit crates at the entrance. It was routine, the kind of peaceful start to a day he had grown to appreciate. But that morning was about to become anything but ordinary. As he turned back inside, a soft scraping noise caught his attention. He looked down and saw a small French bulldog standing timidly by the entrance. Its fur was patchy, smeared with dirt from nights spent on the street, and its ribs pressed faintly against its thin frame. Yet the little dog wasn't begging for food in the usual way. He wasn't barking or pawing at the door. Instead, he lowered his head and gently placed something on the ground. It was a crumpled piece of aluminum foil wrapped around a few scraps of bread and meat. Mr. Thompson froze for a moment, confused by the strange sight. "What in the world?" he murmured under his breath. The dog stepped back after setting down the offering, his wide eyes fixed on the shopkeeper as if waiting for a response. His tail wagged, not in excitement, but in nervous anticipation. Something about the scene struck Mr. Thompson deeply. He crouched down and noticed how carefully the little bulldog had carried the bundle, almost like a child presenting a gift. But why? And more importantly, why the scraps? "Are you trading with me?" Mr. Thompson asked softly, half smiling at his own ridiculous thought. Yet the dog tilted his head as if he understood. Curiosity getting the better of him, Mr. Thompson picked up the bundle. It wasn't much, hardly edible, but clearly, it was all the dog had. He sighed, his heart tightening with a mixture of pity and intrigue. He walked inside, filled a small bowl with milk, and set it outside. The French bulldog's reaction was immediate. He rushed forward but didn't drink. Instead, he grabbed the bowl delicately by its rim, careful not to spill, and darted away down the street. Mr. Thompson blinked in surprise. "Hey, where are you going?" he called out. But the dog had already disappeared into the maze of alleyways. Something inside him stirred. That wasn't the behavior of a stray thinking only of himself. The bulldog had purpose, determination. He hadn't asked for the milk for his own thirst. He was carrying it somewhere. Intrigued and uneasy, Mr. Thompson followed at a distance. He walked past narrow lanes, puddles reflecting the morning light, and broken fences that lined the older part of town. The sound of the dog's nails clicking against the pavement guided him until he turned a corner, and what he saw rooted him to the spot. In a shallow cardboard box tucked beneath a shed, 3 tiny puppies stirred. Their eyes barely open, their bodies fragile, and their whimpers weak. The bulldog placed the bowl in front of them and nudged it closer, urging the pups to drink. Mr. Thompson felt his throat tighten. The little dog hadn't been begging for himself at all. He had been searching for a way to keep his babies alive. The sight shook him to his core. A stray, worn out and starving, had gathered scraps to offer as payment, just to earn enough compassion for a bowl of milk. Not for himself, but for his family. In that moment, Mr. Thompson realized this was no ordinary encounter. It was an act of selflessness and resilience that few humans could match. As he stood there, watching the pups lap at the milk, the bulldog lifted his gaze toward him. Their eyes met. One tired man who had seen much in life, and one desperate animal who had given everything to protect what mattered most. There was a silent understanding between them, a plea for help, and a promise not to look away. Mr. Thompson took a deep breath, his mind racing with questions. Who had abandoned this loyal creature? How long had he been fighting alone on the streets? And most importantly, was there enough time to save the puppies before it was too late? The morning that began like any other had turned into a moment that would change his life forever. And for the first time in years, Mr. Thompson whispered to himself, "I can't walk away from this." The discovery of the puppies lingered in Mr. Thompson's mind long after he returned to his store. He couldn't shake the image of the French Bulldog carefully feeding his babies with milk he had bargained for using scraps. It was selflessness in its purest form, and yet so fragile. That evening, when business slowed down, Mr. Thompson gathered a cardboard box, some cloth rags, and extra food. He knew the pups wouldn't last long in the cold shed, exposed to the wind and the damp ground. His plan was simple: bring them back to his store's storeroom where it was warmer, feed them properly, and figure out what to do next. But as with most good intentions, reality was not so forgiving. When Mr. Thompson placed the box of pups behind the counter, his longtime cashier, a stern woman named Mrs. Carver, raised an eyebrow so high it nearly touched her hairline. "What on earth is that?" she demanded, crossing her arms. "Puppies," Mr. Thompson replied softly, adjusting the cloth around them. "They were starving. Their mother brought them scraps to trade for milk. They need help." Mrs. Carver frowned, her voice sharp. "Strays, Tom. Sickly, dirty strays. You can't just bring them into a food store. What if they spread disease? What if the health inspector walks in? Do you want to lose your license after all these years?" Her words cut deep because they weren't wrong. Mr. Thompson's store was his livelihood, the result of decades of labor. A single violation could ruin him. Yet, as he looked down at the pups squirming weakly in the box, his heart told him something louder than logic ever could. They deserved a chance. "They're alive because of their mother's determination," he said firmly. "I won't throw that away." But Mrs. Carver wasn't the only obstacle. News traveled quickly in small towns, and by the next morning, a handful of customers had already heard about the old man keeping strays in his shop. Some shook their heads disapprovingly as they picked up their groceries. Others whispered to one another within earshot, words like unsanitary and reckless. One man, a younger farmer with mud still clinging to his boots, confronted him outright. "Tom, you've lost it. That flea-ridden mutt will bring nothing but trouble. Best thing you can do is call animal control and let them deal with it." Mr. Thompson's jaw tightened. He had seen animal control trucks before. Dogs taken in rarely came back. They weren't seen as lives worth saving, just numbers on a list. He couldn't let that fate claim this bulldog, not after what he'd witnessed. Yet the pressure was real. Every glare, every whispered judgment weighed on him. His store wasn't just a business. It was trust built with the community. If he lost that, everything he had worked for could collapse. That night, as he closed up shop, he found the bulldog waiting patiently outside the door, tail thumping lightly against the ground. The little dog didn't whine or push his way in. He simply sat, eyes fixed on Mr. Thompson as if asking, "Did you keep your promise?" Mr. Thompson knelt beside him. "They're safe," he whispered. "But it's not enough, is it? People don't understand." He ran a hand over the bulldog's coarse fur, feeling the scars and bones beneath. "You fought this hard for them. The least I can do is fight for you." The bulldog leaned into his touch, a quiet affirmation. In that moment, the conflict within Mr. Thompson became clear. This wasn't just about puppies in a box anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, even if it meant standing alone. The next morning, he made a decision. He would keep feeding them, keep them safe, and ignore the judgment for as long as he could. But deep inside, he knew this fragile balance couldn't last. Sooner or later, something or someone would force his hand. And as the first light of dawn filtered through the shop windows, he whispered to himself, "If they want to fight over this, then I'll give them one." The story was no longer about survival. It was about defiance, loyalty, and the price of compassion in a world too eager to look away. For a few days, the fragile balance held. Mr. Thompson fed the puppies quietly in the storeroom, slipping bowls of warm milk and softened bread to them while keeping the mother close. The French bulldog would sit watchfully by the box, her sharp eyes never leaving her babies, as if making sure no harm could come to them. But secrets don't stay hidden for long in a small town. One late afternoon, The sound of pounding rain against the shop windows filled the grocery. A storm had rolled in, fierce and unrelenting. Mr. Thompson was busy helping customers load their groceries into bags when a loud gasp broke through the quiet of the store. "Tom!" a customer shouted. "What's that smell?" Before he could answer, another customer pointed toward the storeroom door, which had been left slightly ajar. The faint whimper of a puppy drifted out, carried into the aisles by the storm wind that rattled the building. Mrs. Carver rushed forward, her face flushed with panic. "I told you this would happen," she cried. "Now everyone knows." The group of townsfolk gathered, peering inside. There, nestled in the box, were the puppies, eyes barely open, their tiny bodies pressed against each other for warmth. And beside them sat the French bulldog. Wet from the rain, she tracked in, her black coat slick with water and dirt. She stared at the strangers, her small body tense, ready to defend her pups against anyone who came too close. The reaction was immediate and cruel. "This is disgusting," one woman sneered. "Dogs in a food shop? Tom, you're endangering all of us." Another man shook his head. "This is pathetic. You're not running a shelter. Call animal control before this gets out of hand." The words cut through Mr. Thompson like knives. He wanted to explain, to tell them about the night he discovered the Bulldog trading scraps for milk, about the courage it took for her to keep her babies alive. But he could see from their hardened expressions that they weren't interested in the story, only in their own comfort. Still, he couldn't stay silent. "They're just trying to survive," he said firmly. "This mother, she's risked everything to keep them alive. If you can't see the beauty in that, then you're blind." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of the storm hammering against the roof. For a brief moment, no one spoke. Then Mrs. Carver stepped in, her voice icy but controlled. "You're gambling with your store, Tom. And once word spreads further, you won't just lose customers, you'll lose everything." That night, after locking up, Mr. Thompson sat in the storeroom staring at the small family. His hands trembled as he poured milk into a dish. The bulldog licked his hand gently, as though sensing his turmoil. Her eyes said everything words couldn't. "Don't give up on us." But fate wasn't done testing him. The next morning, the storm had worsened. The power flickered on and off, and a leak had begun dripping water into the storeroom. When Mr. Thompson checked the puppies, his heart sank. The smallest of the litter lay motionless, its body cold despite the mother's attempts to nudge it awake. Mr. Thompson knelt, his eyes blurring with tears. He picked up the tiny body and held it in his rough hands, whispering, "I'm sorry, little one. I was too late." The bulldog whined softly, circling her lost pup before finally settling at his feet, her head bowed in defeat. The loss was crushing. For Mr. Thompson, it wasn't just the death of a puppy. It was a symbol of the fragile fight he had chosen to take on. For the bulldog, it was heartbreak she endured silently, her loyalty shifting even more tightly toward the man who stayed by her side. As he buried the tiny pup behind the store that night, the storm raged above him, soaking him to the bone. Yet inside, something hardened. This wasn't over. If the world wanted to push against them, then he would push back harder. Wiping the rain from his face, he whispered into the darkness, "You didn't lose your fight, little one. You gave me mine." And with that, Mr. Thompson made a vow. No matter the judgment, no matter the cost, he would see this bulldog and her remaining puppies through. What he didn't know was that his choice would soon put him at odds with more than just townsfolk. It would pit him against the very institutions meant to keep order. The storm finally broke the next morning, leaving the town washed clean under a pale sky. Puddles lined the streets, and the groceries parking lot was littered with leaves and branches. Mr. Thompson arrived early, as he always did, unlocking the front door with tired eyes. He hadn't slept much. The loss of the puppy still weighed on him, but the determined gaze of the French bulldog gave him strength. She followed him into the store that morning, her small paws tapping quietly against the floor. Her remaining pups nestled safely in a box lined with old towels. Though fragile, they seemed stronger now, their squeaks filling the air like tiny declarations of life. But before he could even brew his first cup of coffee, a sharp knock rattled the glass front door. Standing outside was a white van with the words County Animal Control printed in bold letters. Two officers stepped out. One young and uncertain, the other older, his jaw tight and expression set. Mr. Thompson's stomach sank. Word had spread faster than he'd hoped. He opened the door reluctantly. The older officer stepped inside first, his eyes scanning the store with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Thompson?" "Yes," he said, steadying his voice. "We've had several complaints. Customers are saying you're harboring stray dogs inside a food establishment. That's a violation of health codes." Before Tom could answer, the French Bulldog appeared from the storeroom, her black coat glistening in the morning light. She froze at the sight of the strangers, her small body lowering into a defensive stance. A low growl rumbled from her chest. "There she is," the older officer muttered. He gestured to his partner. "Bag her up. Pups too." "Wait," Mr. Thompson said sharply, stepping between them. "This isn't what you think. She's not just some stray. She's a mother fighting to keep her babies alive. She's not hurting anyone." The younger officer hesitated, glancing at the Bulldog's wide, fearful eyes. But the older one shook his head. "Rules are rules. If we let this slide, where does it end?" Tom felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He knew he couldn't win this argument with logic. They had the law on their side. But what they didn't have was heart. "Look at her," he said, his voice breaking. "Look at what she's done. She carried scraps through the rain just to trade for milk. She kept those pups alive when everything around her wanted her gone. And now, after all that, you're telling me the best thing we can do is drag her away." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Even the Bulldog seemed to pause, her growl quieting as her eyes shifted from the officer's back to Tom, as if she understood he was fighting for her. The younger officer finally spoke. "Sir, maybe we could give him a few days. Let him figure out a safer arrangement." The older officer shot him a look. "Our job isn't to bend rules. It's to enforce them." He stepped forward, pulling a catch-pole from the van. The Bulldog backed up, her paws sliding on the linoleum floor, her body trembling. She wasn't a fighter, she was a survivor. But Tom couldn't watch her be taken. In a sudden burst of courage, he spread his arms wide. "You'll have to go through me first," he said, his voice low but steady. The officer froze, not because of Tom's words, but because of the sight behind him. One of the puppies, tiny, barely strong enough to walk, had stumbled out of the box. It waddled across the floor, dragging its small body clumsily toward the French Bulldog. It pressed itself against her leg, its squeaky whimper echoing in the quiet store. The young officer's face softened instantly. "They're just babies," he whispered. The older officer let out a frustrated sigh, lowering the pole. "You've got 72 hours, Thompson," he said finally. "After that, if they're still here, we take them. No exceptions." With that, the officers left, the door slamming shut behind them. Mr. Thompson dropped to his knees beside the French Bulldog, who immediately licked his face as if thanking him for standing his ground. He buried his hand in her damp fur, his voice hoarse. "3 days," he whispered. 3 days to prove you belong here." The Bulldog's eyes, deep and unwavering, met his. In that look was a promise. She wasn't giving up, and neither would he. But as Tom glanced out at the van disappearing down the street, he knew the fight ahead wouldn't just be about saving a dog and her pups. It would be about challenging an entire system that couldn't see the difference between a nuisance and a miracle. And the clock was already ticking. The next 3 days became a blur of worry and determination. Mr. Thompson worked tirelessly, balancing his store duties with caring for the French Bulldog and her fragile pups. He fed them warmed milk through tiny bottles, cleaned their bedding, and even stayed late after closing, just to watch them sleep. Customers who came into the store noticed the change in him. He wasn't just the tired old grocer anymore. There was a new light in his eyes, something that hadn't been there in years. Still, the weight of the deadline pressed on him. 72 hours. That was all he had. On the second evening, while he was restocking shelves, The bell above the door jingled. A woman in her 30s stepped inside, shaking off the rain from her coat. She had sharp eyes but a kind face, framed by damp brown hair. She walked straight to the counter where Tom stood. "Mr. Thompson?" she asked softly. "Yes, ma'am. How can I help you?" She hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the storeroom where the Bulldog rested with her pups. "I heard about the dog. The French Bulldog." Tom stiffened. "Who told you that?" "Doesn't matter," she replied, lowering her voice. "What matters is, I think I know who she is." Tom frowned. "What do you mean?" The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled flyer. It was old, water-stained, but still clear enough to see. A missing pet poster. The photo showed the same black French Bulldog, her eyes wide and gentle. Underneath were the words, "Missing. Answers to the name Luna. Family devastated. Reward offered." Tom's hands trembled as he held the paper. "Luna," the woman nodded. "She belonged to my sister. They lived 2 towns over. About 6 months ago, someone broke into their backyard and left the gate wide open. Luna disappeared that night. My sister searched everywhere. Flyers, shelters, online posts. Nothing. She thought Luna was gone forever." The revelation hit Tom like a thunderclap. Luna wasn't just another stray. She was a family dog. Someone's best friend. Someone's missing piece. His first instinct was relief. This meant Luna had a home. People who loved her. But then he looked toward the storeroom, where she lay curled protectively around her pups. Would her owners even know about them? Would they want them? Or would they see them as a burden? "Where's your sister now?" Tom asked. The woman's voice cracked. "She passed away 2 months ago. Cancer." She never stopped talking about Luna, though. Even in the hospital, she kept saying, "If only Luna came home." Tom's chest tightened. He stared down at the flyer, the picture of Luna smiling back at him. This wasn't just about saving a dog anymore. It was about honoring a dying woman's final wish. But before he could respond, Luna emerged from the back, her pups squeaking as they followed her unsteadily. She padded toward the counter, her eyes lifting to meet the woman's. For a moment, the store seemed to hold its breath. The woman knelt down slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It really is you," she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. Luna sniffed her fingers, then licked them gently, as if recognizing a long-lost connection. Tom's heart ached at the sight. Fate had brought them together again. But there was a problem. Animal control was still coming. And now, with Luna's identity revealed, things could get even more complicated. "You can't let them take her," the woman said urgently, wiping her tears. "If they do, she'll be just another case in their system. She belongs with family." "Family?" Tom echoed. "Yes," she said firmly, standing. "Me. My sister's gone, but Luna is part of her memory. I'll take her. And the pups, too, if she won't leave them." Tom's mind raced. Relief and fear battled inside him. On one hand, this solved everything. Luna had a rightful home. On the other, it put them all in direct conflict with the authorities who already had their eyes on the store. The woman's voice grew steadier. "I don't care what they say. I'll fight for her. My sister would have wanted that. And so do I." At that moment, Luna pressed her head against the woman's leg, the pups stumbling at her feet. It was as if the dog herself had chosen. Tom swallowed hard, his eyes misting. The revelation had changed everything. Luna wasn't just a survivor. She was a promise, a bridge between past and present. But outside, the storm clouds gathered again, darker this time, and Tom knew the hardest fight was still to come. The deadline was almost over. The following 48 hours passed like a blur, every moment heavy with both urgency and hope. Rachel barely left Luna's side, carrying stacks of papers, photos, and memories that would serve as proof of ownership. Tom, though exhausted, became her anchor, making phone calls, scheduling an emergency vet appointment, and even contacting local news outlets who were eager to cover the Bulldog with the bag of food. The vet clinic visit the next morning was tense. Luna, still weak from months of hardship, padded nervously across the cold tile floor, her pups squealing in a crate nearby. The veterinarian, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes, examined Luna thoroughly. "She's malnourished, but strong," the vet said softly, gently stroking Luna's black fur. "And these pups, well, they're fighters too. You've done right by bringing her in." Rachel's relief was palpable. She handed over every document she had, along with her ID, to formalize Luna's case. The vet agreed to file the paperwork directly with the county, verifying that Luna would remain with Rachel under proper care. It was the first real sign that the Bulldog's future might finally be safe. But even as the pieces fell into place, doubt gnawed at Rachel's mind. Bureaucracy was cold and unfeeling. What if the officers didn't honor the vet's confirmation? What if Luna was taken anyway? Tom noticed her silence on the drive back. His hands tightened on the wheel as he said, "Rachel, I don't know what's going to happen. But I do know this, Luna found you for a reason. And I think she's exactly where she belongs." That night, Rachel stayed at Tom's market again. Luna curled on a blanket with her pups while Rachel whispered stories about her sister, memories of childhood games, family dinners, and the day her sister first brought home a tiny black bulldog puppy. She named her Luna because she said the dog's eyes looked like little moons, Rachel said, smiling through tears. She never stopped searching for her. Not once. Luna lifted her head then, as if she understood. She pressed her face against Rachel's chest, a quiet acknowledgement that the bond of love, though tested by time and cruelty, had survived. The next morning, the officers returned. Tom's stomach twisted as the white van pulled up once again. Rachel stood ready at the counter, papers stacked neatly in her trembling hands, Luna sitting obediently at her side. The same tall officer entered first, his expression unreadable. Behind him, the female officer carried a clipboard. "Well?" he asked briskly. Rachel handed over the vet's report, the proof of ownership, and the documented transfer of care. Her voice was steady, though her hands shook. "Luna belongs with me, and I will give her and her pups the life they deserve." The female officer scanned the documents carefully. She looked at the photos, Luna as a puppy in Rachel's sister's arms, the missing posters, the vet certification. Her face softened again. "I see no reason to dispute this," she said at last. "It's all here. Luna is yours." Rachel exhaled sharply, her shoulders collapsing with relief. She bent down to hug Luna, who wagged her tail furiously, her eyes shining like the little moons she'd been named for. But the taller officer wasn't finished. He glanced at Tom, his gaze lingering. "You should know, most people don't bother. Strays, abandoned animals, they don't usually get this kind of fight. Consider yourself lucky, Mississippi." Rachel looked at Luna, then back at the officer. Her voice was quiet but resolute. "No, she's not lucky. She's loved. And that's what saved her." For the first time, even the taller officer seemed to falter. He gave a curt nod before turning toward the door. When the van drove away for the last time, the weight lifted from the room like a heavy curtain. Rachel dropped to her knees, embracing Luna and her pups, tears of joy streaming freely now. Tom, leaning against the counter, smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit his weary features. "Looks like this old market finally did something worth remembering." The following days were filled with transformation. Rachel moved Luna and her pups into her home, where warm blankets, bowls of food, and endless affection awaited them. Tom visited often, each time greeted by Luna's wagging tail and the playful chaos of the pups tumbling over one another. The bond between Rachel and Luna grew unshakable. Luna was no longer just a lost dog. She was a bridge between the past and the future, carrying Rachel's sister's memory forward while embracing a new life of safety and love. One evening, as the sun set behind the rooftops, Rachel sat on her porch with Luna resting at her feet. She watched the pups chase each other across the grass, their joyful yips filling the air. She whispered softly, more to herself than anyone else, "We made it. You're home now." Luna raised her head, her dark eyes glowing in the golden light, and for the first time in years, Rachel felt complete. The story of the bulldog who carried scraps to beg for milk had spread across town, becoming a quiet legend. But for Rachel and Luna, it wasn't about fame or pity. It was about survival, love, and the extraordinary bond that can rise from the ashes of despair. And as Tom locked up the market one night, he couldn't help but smile at the memory of Luna trotting through the rain, her small body brimming with a determination that had changed all of their lives forever. If this story touched your heart, remember, love and loyalty can transform even the darkest moments. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with someone who believes in second chances. Together, we can spread more stories of hope and courage.